Silas led the remaining group, Trapper, Lex, and Briggs, forward. The loss of Carter and Nash weighed heavily on their minds, but there was no time to mourn. The sun blazed overhead, relentless and searing. Trapper moved steadily beside Silas, his experienced eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Lex kept her focus on their surroundings, every muscle tense and ready. Briggs followed close behind, his rifle cradled in his arms as if it were an extension of himself. They trudged through the sand, each step sinking slightly into the hot grains. The air shimmered with heat waves, distorting the landscape and making it difficult to discern shapes in the distance. Their water supplies dwindled rapidly, but they pressed on, driven by the knowledge that turning back was not an option. Hours dragged by in a haze of sweat and determination. The desert seemed endless, a barren wasteland that offered no respite. Yet they kept moving, pushing through the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm them. At last, after what felt like an eternity, they saw it, the faint outlines of the lookout point emerging from the wavering heat. Relief surged through them, giving their tired bodies a much-needed burst of energy. "There it is," Silas said, pointing ahead. "We're almost there." They quickened their pace despite their fatigue. As they approached the outpost, its features became clearer. A structure built for defense with high walls and watchtowers standing sentinel against the harsh desert. Silas signaled for everyone to be on high alert. They didn't know what to expect or what might be waiting for them within those walls. "Stay sharp," Trapper muttered, echoing Silas's thoughts. Lex tightened her grip on her knife belt. The team scanned the outpost, their eyes sharp against the darkening landscape. Silas peered through his binoculars, assessing every shadow and angle. There was no trace of raiders or scavengers, but they remained vigilant. The desert could hide many threats, and complacency would only invite disaster. "Looks clear," Lex whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Still, keep your guard up," Silas replied, lowering his binoculars. Trapper moved closer to the outpost, using the cover of the team. He advanced slowly, every step calculated. Night had fallen, casting long shadows across the sand and cloaking the outpost in darkness. The air cooled slightly, offering a reprieve from the day's relentless heat. As Trapper moved closer, lights suddenly flared to life around the outpost, casting harsh beams that cut through the night. The team's instincts kicked in immediately. They crouched low and drew their weapons, ready for anything. A voice boomed from a speaker mounted on one of the towers. "This is an official national outpost guard. No entry is allowed. Turn back immediately." Trapper froze, recognizing the voice that carried a mix of authority and weariness. He stepped forward cautiously and called out, "Elmet? Is that you?" There was a moment of tense silence before the speaker crackled again. "Trapper? Is it really you?" "It's me," Trapper confirmed, relief evident in his tone. "Hold your position," Elmet ordered. "I'll come down." The lights remained trained on them as they waited, but there was a palpable shift in tension. Silas and the rest of the team exchanged glances, relaxing slightly but keeping their guard up. A figure emerged from the main gate and approached with measured steps. As Elmet drew closer, Trapper's face broke into a rare smile. "It's been a long time," Trapper said. Elmet nodded, his expression a mix of surprise and relief. "Too long. What brings you here?" Trapper clapped Elmet on the shoulder. "We've got trouble, old friend. Fraction X is making moves, and they're not shy about using force." "This is Silas," he said, motioning to the man beside him. "He's the one who got us here in one piece." Elmet nodded at Silas, his eyes scanning over the rest of the team. "And the rest? Briggs, Lex, and Doyle," Trapper introduced each in turn. "They're solid." Elmet's gaze lingered on each member of the team, assessing them with a practiced eye. "Good to meet you all. Now, what's this about Fraction X?" Silas stepped forward, his voice steady. "They're expanding their territory and hitting settlements hard. Rustbrook's in their sights," Elmet frowned. "Rustbrook? That little village beyond the cracked hills?" "That's the one," Trapper confirmed. "We've been working on fortifying it, but we need more hands and supplies." Elmet crossed his arms, considering the situation. "And you came here for?" We need allies, Silas said plainly. Rustbrook's defenses are being bolstered, but without support, we won't hold out long if Fraction X comes in full force. We started reinforcing key points around Rustbrook, Trapper added. Training villagers in combat, setting up patrols. But we can't do it alone. Elmet looked at them for a long moment before nodding slowly. You know I'll help where I can, but resources are tight here too. Silas inclined his head in acknowledgement. We understand. Any support you can offer, men, supplies, would make a difference. We'll need to move quickly, Trapper added. Fraction X won't wait for us to get comfortable. Elmet uncrossed his arms and sighed. All right then, let's discuss specifics inside. He motioned for them to follow him. As they walked through the gate and into the outpost, Elmet led them to a small command center filled with maps and radio equipment. He pointed to a map pinned on the wall showing Rustbrook's location. Show me what you've got planned so far, Elmet said. Trapper stepped up and began explaining their strategy for fortifying Rustbrook, pointing out weak spots that needed shoring up and areas where patrols would be most effective. We've also identified nearby trading posts that can provide additional manpower and supplies, Silas added. Elmet listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking questions for clarification. After several minutes of detailed discussion, Elmet leaned back against a table, arms crossed again but with a look of resolve on his face. All right, I'll see what we can spare. Elmet nodded as the plans came together. We'll send a few of our officers back with you to Rustbrook. They'll help with training and fortifying defenses. In return, some of your villagers can stay here to learn from our setup and assist with our own needs. Silas exchanged a look with Trapper, both men nodding in agreement. Sounds fair, Silas said. Elmet gestured towards a nearby officer. This is Lieutenant Hawk. He'll lead the team heading to Rustbrook. Hawk stepped forward, his sharp eyes studying Silas and the others. I've got a squad ready to move out at first light. Good, Silas replied. We appreciate the support. Hawk's gaze shifted to the remains of the mech they had brought with them. Is that what took down Carter and Nash? Silas followed his gaze. We've been hearing rumors about these mechs, but seeing one up close, it's something else. Hawk crouched down, examining the mechanical parts with interest. If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to use it against them. Trapper joined them, nodding in agreement. That's what we were thinking too. Any insights you have would be invaluable. Elmet turned back to Silas and Trapper. We'll have our engineers take a closer look at this mech while you're here. Maybe we can learn something useful before sending it back with you. Silas agreed, feeling a glimmer of hope that this collaboration might turn the tide in their favor. Every bit helps, he said. Elmet stood up straight and clapped his hands together. All right then, let's get moving. Hawk, gather your squad and make sure they're ready by dawn. Hawk saluted and left to prepare his team. Elmet turned back to Silas and Trapper, his expression serious but determined. We'll do everything we can to support Rustbrook. And in return, we'll need your help fortifying our defenses here too. Silas extended his hand towards Elmet, sealing their agreement with a firm shake.
The hangar lights hummed softly over the damaged mech chassis. Orianthe stood alone beside it. Garrett lingered near the entrance, arms folded. Orianthe ignored him. The memory core had been partially recovered. Enough to replay engagement telemetry. She activated the projection. Grainy footage flickered to life. The mech advanced. Targets identified. Then, a single hostile moved differently. Precise. Efficient. He aimed for structural weakness, not center mass. The second shot came after the mech adjusted its plating. He had noticed. He knew where to hit, Orianthe said quietly. Garrett scoffed. Lucky shot. No. She replayed the frame. Power core seemed compromised at reinforced joint. Not obvious. Not accidental. Garrett shifted. You're overthinking a drifter? Orianthe didn't blink. Above the projection display, faint network lines pulsed, routing signals outward. White city relay markers. Garrett didn't look up. Orianthe did. She studied the freeze frame of Silas Kane one last time. He didn't fight like a scavenger. He fought like someone who understood systems. Garrett turned toward the exit. He won't survive the next one. Orianthe shut down the projection. Maybe, she said. But for the first time since he escaped. She wasn't sure who was hunting who.
Rustbrook buzzed with renewed energy. The arrival of new people from the Outpost, including Lieutenant Hawk and his team, brought fresh knowledge and strategies. Villagers trained harder, now bolstered by Hawk's tactical drills. Silas watched as a young man practiced a takedown maneuver, noting the precision in his movements. A gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers from the surrounding fields, a rare moment of serenity in the wasteland. But the peace felt fragile, as if balanced on a knife's edge. Then, as if nature sensed the impending danger, the sky darkened abruptly. Ominous clouds rolled in, casting long shadows over Rustbrook. A chill ran down Silas's spine. He looked up, frowning at the sudden shift. The alarm sounded, a piercing wail that sent everyone into action. "Fraction X," someone shouted. Silas sprinted to the gate, his heart pounding with adrenaline. "Positions," he barked. Trapper Reed nodded, already coordinating villagers to man the defenses. The enemy swarmed over the hill like a dark tide. Chaos erupted. Villagers fired from makeshift barricades while others wielded spears and knives against the onslaught. Silas fought beside Trapper and Briggs, their movements synchronized from countless drills. Amidst the clamor of battle, Silas spotted a familiar figure, Orianthe, leading Fraction X's charge with cold precision. She cut through Rustbrook's defenders like a whirlwind of steel. "Hold your ground," Silas roared over the din. Briggs tackled an enemy to the ground while Lex covered him with swift shots from her crossbow. Trapper took down another with his axe, but more surged forward. Orianthe pushed deeper into Rustbrook, her eyes locking with Silas's for a fleeting moment. He read determination in her gaze but also something else, a flicker of hesitation. Silas and Orianthe clashed in the center of the village. Sparks flew as their weapons met in brutal harmony. He could see her assessing him even in combat, weighing her options. A sudden burst of gunfire from Briggs distracted Orianthe long enough for Silas to disarm her. He pressed his blade to her throat but hesitated. "Yield," he commanded. She glared at him but dropped her weapon. Villagers quickly restrained her while Silas scanned the battlefield. The tide had turned. Fraction X was retreating under relentless fire and fierce resistance. As calm returned to Rustbrook, Silas approached Orianthe, who sat bound but unbroken. "Why are you here?" he asked. "You know why," she replied, her voice steady despite her defeat. Silas crouched before her. "You're too smart for this chaos. Join us instead." Orianthe narrowed her eyes but remained silent, considering his words carefully amidst the rubble and aftermath of battle. Orianthe's silence stretched, broken only by the distant cries of wounded villagers and the crackle of burning debris. Silas watched her, searching for any sign that she might consider his offer. Around them, the village bustled with activity as survivors tended to the injured and fortified their defenses. "Silas," Trapper called out, approaching with urgency in his step. "We've secured the perimeter. What do we do with her?" Silas glanced at Orianthe, then back at Trapper. "We keep her under close guard. She's valuable." Trapper nodded, signaling two villagers to take Orianthe away. As they led her to a secure cabin, she cast one last glance over her shoulder at Silas, eyes narrowing in thought. Turning back to the scene, Silas felt a mix of exhaustion and relief wash over him. The village had survived another assault, but each attack left them more worn down. He knew they needed more than just brute strength to hold out against Fraction X. "Silas," Elder Miriam's voice broke through his thoughts. She stood nearby, her face lined with worry and determination. "We need to talk." They moved to a quieter spot near the central structure. Miriam gestured for Silas to sit on a bench beside her. "The villagers fought bravely today," she began, "but it's clear we're stretched thin." Silas nodded. We need more allies and better strategies. Miriam sighed, looking out at the bustling village. We can't keep relying on just defense. We need to take the fight to them. Silas's mind raced through possibilities. There's still that mech we disabled and brought back here, he said thoughtfully. If we could reverse engineer it. Miriam raised an eyebrow. That's risky, but necessary, Silas countered. It might give us an edge. Miriam leaned back, considering his words. I'll gather our engineers and see what they can do with it. As she rose to leave, Trapper approached again, this time with a grim expression. Silas, there's something you need to see. They followed Trapper through the village until they reached the edge of Rustbrook, where a small group of villagers had gathered around something on the ground. What is it? Silas asked. Trapper pointed down at a piece of tattered fabric emblazoned with Fraction X's emblem. We found this near one of the bodies. Silas knelt down, inspecting the fabric closely. It wasn't just any emblem, it was marked with symbols indicating rank and status within Fraction X. This belonged to someone important, Silas murmured. Trapper nodded grimly. Which means they'll be back, and in greater numbers. Silas stood up, clutching the fabric tightly in his hand as he looked out over Rustbrook once more. The village was safe for now, but he knew their fight was far from over. We need to be ready, he said quietly but firmly. Miriam joined them, her eyes reflecting the same resolve. We will be. The village buzzed with a nervous energy as Silas and Miriam made their way to the makeshift workshop where the engineers had started dismantling the captured mech. The interior was filled with the clanging of metal and the hiss of welding torches, a stark contrast to the tense silence outside. We're making progress, one of the engineers reported, looking up from his workbench covered in scattered parts. But it's going to take time to understand this tech. Silas studied the disassembled pieces, trying to decipher their functions. Time isn't something we have much of. Another engineer wiped sweat from his brow. We'll do what we can, but integrating this into our defenses is a challenge. Miriam placed a reassuring hand on Silas's shoulder. They're doing their best. Silas nodded, though his mind raced with plans and contingencies. We need to expedite this process. I'll talk to Bartok. See if he can spare some of his tech-savvy people. Leaving the workshop, they walked back through Rustbrook's narrow streets. Villagers paused their work to nod respectfully at them, a mix of hope and worry etched on their faces. As they neared the central square, Silas noticed Orianthe standing under guard near the secure cabin. Her gaze was fixed on him, intense and calculating. Let me talk to her, Silas told Miriam. Miriam hesitated but then signaled the guards to step back slightly. Silas approached Orianthe, keeping his voice low. Why are you here? He asked directly. Orianthe met his gaze evenly. You know why. Silas crossed his arms. We need information about Fraction X's next move. She glanced around at the villagers bustling nearby before speaking again. I might have some intel, but it comes at a price. Silas arched an eyebrow. What price? My freedom, she replied without hesitation. Silas studied her for a moment, weighing her words carefully. Trusting Orianthe was risky, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I can't promise that, he said finally. But if your information is good, we can negotiate. Orianthe nodded slightly. Fraction X is planning an assault on Rustbrook soon, within days. They're amassing forces just beyond the eastern ridge. Silas felt a chill run down his spine despite the heat of the day. If she was telling the truth, they had even less time than he thought. Why are you helping us? He asked quietly. Orianthe's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Because there's more at stake here than just your village or Fraction X. Before Silas could press further, Trapper approached with urgent news. Silas, we've spotted scouts near the eastern perimeter, Trapper said breathlessly. Silas turned to Miriam, who had joined them upon hearing Trapper's words. We need everyone ready, Silas instructed quickly. And prepare for evacuation if necessary. Miriam nodded sharply and began issuing orders to nearby villagers. As chaos erupted around them, Silas locked eyes with Orianthe once more. For now, she remained an enigma, one that could tip the balance in their favor or lead them to ruin.